Well, yeah, and look, but I would even go so far as to say this. By definition of being technologists, which is what we are if you're in this field, right? And technology is what for the last 3 decades we've seen is just absolute change, right? That's what it is. It's constantly looking at different things. How do we make new things using existing technology to make certain things better and change certain aspects of business life, etc. So by definition, if you're a technologist, you're in this field, like you are a change agent. So absolutely, you should be questioned. We should all be questioning things that we're doing and going along, because just because we've always done it this way, that should never be a solid answer for anyone, period. We say that and we hear that, we go, okay, well, it's nice it's always been that way, but why? Let's start looking at it, right? Because a lot of these decisions of why they've always been that way was because of decisions of limitations that they had at that time. I go back to, I think of Iron Man, right? When Tony finds the video from his father, and he tells him, Tony, I am limited by the technology of my time, right? And so he knew, I'm going to leave this message for my son because I've gone as far as I can possibly come. I can't think of any other way to do this because things that I need to do don't exist, right? But one day you will, because you'll take a look at this problem and you'll have different technology and you'll be able to solve it. Like that right there, right, is exactly where all of us should be thinking. It's like, okay, well, we made this decision 30, 40, 50 years ago. Hell, even 10 years ago. Hell, in tech, 2 months ago. I mean, just look how fast things move.
Yeah.
We made this decision then. Let's look at it again and say, why did we make this decision? What led us to, what limiting factors did we have that led us to design it this way? Do those things still exist? Oh, well, two of them don't. Well, then let's start thinking about this, right? Because you're right. Like identity does need to shift and evolve, and it's going to, right? By just sheer force of being a technology industry, right? It's going to change, right? We're going to see a shift in how things are done, and so it's going to have to catch up. I just think that we're in a good position where we can lead that change. We can look ahead of it and go, okay, we see where things are going. Let's start to develop and question and create this flexibility to do identity in different ways that are truly more tied in, with the business and kind of flow with it. I'm really excited over like the next decade of what's going to happen in identity. There's some really cool things that I think that we can do and apply to, truly get this to where a lot of us that are, that are true like technophiles, and we've been in this forever. We see all these things, like things that we said, well, that'll never happen because the business will never accept it. I think we'll see that shift in the next decade. Like I truly do. I personally, like, I think things like access requests, I think they'll be a thing of the past. I think they'll just disappear. Like, honestly, it'll be in this contextual kind of, like, you're in Slack, you're in Teams, you're in whatever, new, chat system's going to be created in 2 years because we create a brand new one like every couple of years, right? Whatever it is. But in that conversation, you're talking about what you need. It's like, oh, okay, well, here's the access request. Yeah, I need access to this code. No problem. Boom. And it's just in the background, it's just done. It's like, okay, great. You got it. You need that. I'll go provision it. Knock yourself out.
Well, I think there's 2 points that I'd make here. The first one is on what you're talking about, access requests. I think, we're seeing, you hear the terms RBAC, ABAC, PBAC, et cetera. I don't think a lot of people understand really the differences between the two or the three. And I think what I always go back to is they go, oh, well, isn't RBAC also ABAC if you have birthright rules? It's like, the answer is no, it's not, because it's not in the session. Like when the actual authorization takes place is really the difference between PBAC, ABAC, and RBAC, and people don't really understand that. And I think to your point, we're going to progressively get into real time authorization, and that's going to change a lot of things. And with data science and whatever, I think that's going to be a whole lot easier to figure those things out. To your point, it kind of spawned into something in me of I think I'm now 45 years old in this 20 years. You ever been to I was at the F1 race, right? Standing in the line to get a beer. The line's 35 people long. Standing there waiting to get a beer. I finally get to the front of the line. I look behind me. There's no one behind me. Like, I was the last guy in line the entire time walking up. And the analogy I'm making is I feel like in identity right now, that is us. There aren't a lot of people that are younger than us that are coming out challenging the status quo. Maybe they don't want to be in identity. I mean, look, it's a super sexy business to be in. I get it, but we aren't seeing those younger people that are coming down and then challenging things. Or the other answer is they are, and we're not listening to them. We're going, oh, well, you don't get it. Right. And so I think we need to stop and think about, like, what are other people telling us? How do others want to work? I remember when I saw people moving from on-prem Outlook, like it was Duke University, I think is who it was. They literally had to go to Gmail for students and they had to go to Outlook for staff simply because students tag everything, younger people tag everything, and older folks put them in folders. And neither side wanted to budge, right? And so I think we need to stop and go, well, what identity are we building, right? And like, is our brain, are we rebuilding identity that was seated in us in the past, or are we really looking at like how can we? I mean, I'll give you a perfect example of this, and you and I have talked about this ad nauseum. But I was sitting there one day, and I'm like, okay, for access requests, I make an access request for 6 months. So it's the beginning of time. We will approve it, and we'll give it to you for 6 months. And have it for 6 months. Well, all of a sudden now this least privileged concept comes in, zero standing privileges comes in. Well, what if I'm giving it to you for 6 months, but how long are you really using it? What if I gave it to you for 30 days and said you're approved for 6 months? But now, if I can give you, to your point, if my technology has evolved in a way that I have a vehicle to give it back to you that's frictionless, i.e., no approval required. Why? Because it's already approved. All of a sudden, you go into Slack and you go, I need it back. A Slack bot, I mean, heck, ChatGPT can probably figure out what it is you need without even asking, right? And you just go, I need my access back, and it gets it back to you in real time. Now, you can still do out of session management of authorization, but you can do it essentially in real time. And now what you have is you have users that are sitting at a zero standing privileges place. So you can't, if you were to hack them, you can't do much with their accounts because they're not using it. But metrics around renewal metrics. Do you realize you're giving this to people for 6 months, but only 1% of people have renewed it after 2 weeks? What does that tell you, right? And then you get data science to start honing those things in. And all of a sudden he goes, well, actually, we used to give it to you for 6 months, but data science says now it should be a 3 week window or whatever. And that's
Right.
completely changing the way we're doing things. But that doesn't really, it goes back to your point about the iPhone, right? We're moving more towards the way people interact with computers and technology than away from it. And I remember my dad, he was an architect. And when he left, he worked for a company called Hayworth. They make office furniture. And when he left, he told the people, he goes, I'm 66 years old, whatever. The train has stopped. I've gotten off. I looked back, and the train is leaving the station. And you know what, guys? It's okay. You guys use CAD, you use all these things technology, I don't know how to use any of that anymore. I'm still used to doing pen on paper. And I do look at identity in that way of like the train has stopped. It's leaving the station again, and where is it going? And whoever wants to be on board better be ready for where this train is going because it's going to go faster. It's going to be a crazier ride, and it's going to be very different. It's going to accelerate at a faster speed than what it ever was in the past. And to people like you and me, and like Mike Kaiser and all these guys that we know, that's exciting. That's super
Yeah.
fun. But it does change. It changes the way you have to think about identity. It changes your ability to challenge other people that maybe you're superior in terms of a vice president or something. I'm going, no, 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 you don't get it. Like let me rephrase the way this needs to be done, and that's exciting. Like that to me is super super fun. It's going to be challenging and disruptive, and anytime you have disruption in anything, you have pushback, and I guess all you hope. I remember working at Microsoft, we would just yell at each other for it'd be an hour meeting. Within 18 minutes, people yelled. The person that yelled the loudest knew what they were talking about, and we'd walk out of there with it, in 22 minutes because there was no reason to stay. We figured out the answer, but everyone just came in with passion, and if you didn't know what you were talking about, you didn't speak, and
Right.
you quickly learned you didn't want to be in the meeting if you didn't want to contribute because everybody also recognized that you didn't say anything. You know what
Right.
I mean? And we're recognizing that now in identity, right? There are a lot of people that are saying stuff, and there are a lot of people that aren't saying stuff, and that's an interesting dynamic for me to watch.